we have now done the top two part sections of our butterfly wings. We can now move on to the lower bottom part of the wings. So again, I'm going to look at where I need to start. So I'm going to think about what I want to bring up, what I want to have at the bottom, what is going on top of the other, and where am I going to start with this. So if I look at this design, I'm going to have to start with these two teardrops because they are connected to this one, and then we can move downwards with the bottom section. So for now, we're going to start with these two sections, then we're going to do these ring around the teardrops, and we will do these two teardrops and then the curvy pattern, and then we'll move down in this direction. So working still on the front of our pewter, and I'm still working on my liner sheet. We're going to draw in the teardrop that is closest to the middle section of the butterfly leaf. Then we will do the second teardrop. I'm using my sharp tip Teflon tool, and I'm using a medium to a hard pressure to draw in the outline. We can then remove our lino so that we can flatten on our hard surface. So for these two little teardrops, I'm going to add a little bit of extra height from the back. So we put our pewter upside down, and again I'm using both hands to pick it up, and then we turn it over and we place it on our soft surface, and I'm going to use my paper stump to add a little bit of extra height from the back. I'm using soft motions. I don't want to have any visible lines from the front. And this is like coloring in. And remember that you can always come back and you can add some more height, but you cannot remove height. So we turn our pewter back to the front. We remove the soft surface, and then we have to flatten and tidy up again. There we go. And now we can continue with the second teardrop. And I'm working from the front of my pewter on my lino, and I draw in the outline. We remove the lino so that we can flatten from the front. And I'm tidying up not just the edges around the teardrop shape, but any other edges that has lifted up. So now we can continue with the other design. Go back onto our lino, still keeping the pewter face up. We can now do the outline around the teardrop. So first we do the internal little half circle. and then we flatten again. So we remove the lino and we flatten from the front. Now we can do the second half circle, which will finish the central pattern. So back onto our lino, still keeping our design face up. And then we can remove our lino so that we can flatten. Here we go. So that's that central first little bit done. Okay, there we go. So now we can do that last little triangle. So back onto our lino, still on the front of our pewter. And then we can flatten, so we remove our lino and we flatten again from the front. And every time that we flatten, remember that we're pushing height into any of these surrounding designs as well. So you can see how much the central body has risen over the period of us designing and working around it. There we go. So before we continue, I'm just going to tidy up this edge just a little bit, because once I now start with this piece, I can't get into this piece of the body, so I'm going to just make sure that this is nice and tidy before I continue. There we go. So now we can continue with the next section. Again, we have two teardrop shapes, and then after the two teardrop shapes, we have a curvy pattern that we have to do first before we can lift up that entire section. So back onto the front of our pewter, on our liner, we're going to first again do the two teardrop shapes, and we're going to do the one closest to the previous working area first. And then we can flatten. And then we can do the second teardrop. So we're back onto the lino, still on the front of our pewter. and then we can flatten again. It's a very time-consuming project because you've got so many little pieces that you need to finish before you can really work or move on to another piece. And you need to make sure that every little piece is perfect before you move on, because they are connecting with each other. You cannot really go backwards into another piece. So before you move on to your next section, always make sure that you're happy with the current one. There we go. Okay, so that's that 2 teardrops done. So now we can concentrate on the 2 inner curvy patterns, and then we'll do the outer one. So on the front of our pewter, on our liner, we first do the outlines. And I'm using still a medium to a hard pressure. And then we can flatten. So we remove our liner. And I'm not going to try and get into all of the small spaces with the paper stump. I leave the smaller areas for the Teflon tool. Again, I'm flattening a little bit to the surrounding areas as well, because I always want to have a nice flat surface to work on. We can now tidy up with the Teflon tool, and we can now really get into this small little space. And you want to tidy up right against the edges. And that's what's nice about this little skew tip. You can really get into all of the little corner areas. And it doesn't damage your pewter or thin out your pewter as much as the metal tools. Okay, so I'm just going to tidy that up with my metal ball tool as well before we move on. I've got some uneven edges, so I'm using my metal ball tool just to fix that. Here we go. So now we can do the 2 outer ones, and that's a very small curve to do. So I'm not going to do it from the front of my pewter. I'm going to do it from the back of my pewter because it's very thin line. So we're going to turn our pewter upside down. We're going to place it on our soft surface, and then we're going to draw this in as a single line from the back and then flatten from the front. So we're going to put our pewter face down on our soft surface. Again, I'm going to use both hands to pick up my pewter to avoid any areas bending. And we're going to take our Teflon tip, and I'm going to draw in that curvy line. And I'm using a medium pressure for this. And I try to keep my hands in a space where I won't damage any areas that has already been raised. Then we can turn our pewter back to the front and we remove our soft surface. And now I'm going to flatten first around this area. As close as possible to the edge. And then instead of taking my skew tip Teflon tool, I'm first going to use my metal ball tool. And what I'm going to do with the metal ball tool is I'm going to define the sharp edges that I want to keep. So now I'm using a lot of pressure to tidy up that edge, and I'm going to go on the inside and I'm going to flatten the inside. So I'm just using the metal ball tool to draw an outline. And then I will take the Teflon tip and flatten any areas that are left over. I'm going to do the same on the other side. So I'm first going to use my metal ball tool. I'm just going to fix. I traced my line a little bit skew here, so I'm going to show you how I use my skewed Teflon tip as an eraser tool to erase an entire erased section. So I want it actually to stop there. So I need to get rid of all of this. And it's not always possible, but I'm going to try in this instance. So I'm taking my skewed tip Teflon tool, I put it right where I want to start erasing, and I press down and I flatten it. And then I take that same tip and it's like just coloring in, and it disappears. I'm going to use the metal ball tool to create my solid edge again. And I'm going to do it on the inside as well. And then I'm going to flatten the other areas with the Teflon tip. There we go. So now I've got a nice crisp line there. Okay. So now we can raise up that entire section. So we're going to do the outside lines from the front of our pewter on our liner. And I'm going to go back to my Teflon tool and I'm going to define the overall outline. And then we can flatten. And then I'm going to tidy up this internal edge just a little bit. There we go. Okay, so that's that section done. I'm going to raise it up a little bit from the back because it's a bit flat on these edges here. So I'm going to turn my pewter upside down, place it on my soft surface. Again, I'm using both hands to pick it up. And I'm going to use my fingers for this exercise. and I'm going to slightly lift that up, and I'm going to do the same on the other side. So I'm concentrating more on this edge here, and then we can use the sharp tip paper stamp, and we can just reinforce our shapes just a little bit around the back. And then we can turn our pewter back to the front, remove the soft surface, and then we can flatten the area around again. Here we go. So that's nice and raised now. I'm happy with the shape, so we can now continue with the next part of our wing. Okay,